Right, and then vice versa with the summertime, you're fighting the humidity in New England. Exactly the opposite, and it can be 80 to 100% for months out of the year. And you'll see an opposite effect during the summertime. You might get a little bit more moisture than you want in your bud. It might be a little harder to grind up. And rolling again into the next subject is stickiness.
I want to touch on that just a little bit further, George. So how would you evaluate moisture content from just looking at flower? Do you have that ability?
No, it's hard to say. You can't do that. You need to touch it. You need to feel it. You need to smoke it. You need to put it in a grinder and break it up and all that stuff.
And I think it's really important. And one of the things that we have in store that we offer here is a hygrometer. So it's a storage container where it not only tells you the temperature of your flower, but also the humidity level that that's being stored at. It's very important. You're targeting somewhere between 58, 55, and 62, 63%.
Right. In the ambient, air in that jar. It's hard to say,
of course.
The difference, the actual moisture in the bud would be different. You need a different type of tool to read
certainly, but the environment that you want to store it in is generally speaking around 60%.
If you're seeing that the humidity in the hygrometer is dropping and it keeps going down and it goes to whatever's outside, that means that there was no stored moisture in that flower. So it could, you can use it as a tool to figure out if the buds start out dry or
too wet.
Right, yeah.
And you're able to then reinvigorate that bud. Once you know if there is an issue, you can then solve that problem through a lot of different ways. Some of the humidity packs that exist out there on the market, maybe leaving the jar open if it is too humid in a dry environment or vice versa. There's things that you can do once you've identified the issue.
It'll help you start to kind of gauge it yourself.
And understand how to evaluate moisture content better within other flower. So it's definitely a very useful tool. We have multiple colors, so you can put your indicas, your chill bud into a red container. You can put your balanced bud into a black container. You can put your awake bud into a green container. They didn't quite have a yellow that matched, so I went with black instead of the yellow. And you're still able to kind of tell those apart, and they're certainly great tools. I would highly recommend coming in, asking any of our cannasaurs about that. If you do have further questions, they can certainly enlighten you and provide you some more info, show you what those look like as well here in store. And sorry to cut you off. I just thought it was important. They're a very valuable tool. I love them. I've got, I think, 5 myself.
By all means, I like them as well.
So I just wanted to make sure.
Definitely important to have a good container to keep that in, so you're not drying out your bud and turning it into dust. And
so the plastic baggies don't work?
No, it's bad. It's bad.
And another thing to be aware of is many of the containers that the flower is sold in, it will be vacuum sealed or air sealed when it comes to you, but when you first open that, you get that pop, that first intense smell of all those terpenes. From that point on, that seal is broken and that container is not going to be a good storage vessel. So especially when we're looking at high quality premium products, you want to make sure you're storing that. Just like if
you want to take care of your products.
Just like if you buy a nice cigar, you'd put it into a humidor. It's kind of that same idea. We're buying high quality products. You want to take care of them and make sure they're as fresh as possible each time you take them out for consumption.
You're going to spend that much money.
You'd want to take care of it.
You don't want to waste it.
Yeah, certainly.
So, all right, so we kind of touched on stickiness. I'm not going to talk too much more about that. The next thing we have here is desirable smell and taste. So obviously that encompasses all good smells and tastes. Sometimes a negative smell that people smell from cannabis is the skunkiness smell. I personally don't think it's a bad smell, but some people can find it overwhelming. There are a lot of different terpenes that you can come in contact with cannabis. So one specifically I know about is like Tropicana cookies. It's so intense with its smell, some people can't even be in the room when it's being harvested. So like things like that. But another thing we wrote in here is about terpenes. There are over 100 different terpenes that have been identified so far. But some of the most commonly recognized ones are listed below. So myrcene, pinene, caryophyllene, limonene, and terpenolol. Terpenoline.
It's certainly some of those, terpenes I think are new for a lot of people. I think it is, certainly what gives off the smell and the aromas and can influence flavor. It certainly influences the type of high that you have, and there's a lot of information there, but the basics boil down to you want bud that's going to smell appealing to you, right? That you enjoy the smell of. It's going to relate closely to some extent to the taste that you're going to get.
Right, and the effect.
And the effect. So it's very important that you start to understand and guide yourself to what's going to work best for you and understand your own personal preferences.
And also utilize the journal in the back, because when you get a different terpene or a different cannabinoid that you come in contact with and it gives you a really good effect that you like, you want to be able to remember that and note that for a later date.
Yep, and over time you'll be able to start understanding which strains work best for you by using that journal, and upon some further research or conversations with some of our cannasaurs here on site, you'll be able to get a better understanding of those terpene profiles that you enjoy, and then be able to educate yourself further and in those preferences, beyond just flower, what terpene profiles and what types of effects you're going after. You can kind of achieve those results based on knowing those preferences.
After a while, it'll be second nature. You won't even think about it.
You certainly, after a while, won't need the journal, but it's a great tool for those early on who maybe aren't super well versed in these things to gather more information and build their knowledge base.
So undesirable smells and tastes would be something like, mold or mildew or fungus, hay. It might just smell like straight up grass clipping because it's been so dried out and so old, things like that. But generally speaking, we're not going to be bringing those type of products into the store. We're growing them ourselves, so you don't need to worry about that.
Yeah.
At least not at MJ.
Again, something when evaluating flower is important, but shouldn't be anything that we have any issues with here in store. So that pretty much covers some of the high-level topics that we wanted to touch on today in terms of flower evaluation. I always like to speak on one of my personal favorites. It's in store here. It's called Peanut Butter Breath. It has an absolutely great terpene profile, somewhere in the middle in terms of density. So when you squeeze it, it will have somewhat of a spring, but it is a fairly dense nug. Real nice high. It, for me, is, I found, somewhat relaxing on the chill side of the spectrum, but not to the point that I'm going to be couch locked, indica into couch. I can still be functional, do what I need to do, but kind of takes the edge off, helps with, maybe anxiety or stress, but allows me to still be functional. And again, that terpene profile, that smell that it has, I've, for whatever reason, always just been really drawn to.
Yeah.
And so that's my personal favorite. How about you, George? What's on?
So that one's by Happy Valley, right?
It is, yeah.
So they have another one, Super Lemon Haze, and I really like Super Lemon Haze. It's been a favorite of mine for years now. Back years ago when I first got into growing, one of my buddies who, kind of influenced me and helped me start growing, he gave me some cuts of Super Lemon Haze, so I know how hard it can be to grow. And they did a really good job over there at Happy Valley of both growing it, getting the density, bringing out those flavors and those terpenes.
It's the nostalgia for you.
And I just, really, it brought me back, and it really made me appreciate what they did there. That was a well-grown plant. So, that was my favorite that I've seen.
Yeah. Opposite ends of the spectrum, right?
It's the Sativa.
Yeah. So the Super Lemon Haze, certainly more on the awake side of the spectrum. The Peanut Butter Breath, more on that balanced, chill side of the spectrum. Certainly I like the Super Lemon Haze as well. I've had great experiences with it, but not my personal favorite, right? And that's as you start to consume more and understand more about your own personal preferences, you'll be able to speak to and understand that further as well. One last thing we wanted to talk about today. This is pretty interesting. It's current events. We want to bring you some updates on some things happening in the world outside of MJ's as well. This was a pretty interesting article that got sent to the both of us by someone within our staff here in regards to companies creating cannabinoids without actually creating plant material.
So yeah, it was a high level overview of it. So they didn't get real into the details, but essentially they were growing the cannabinoids and terpenes, everything there, almost like a chemical growth, and they were growing it without the plant matter itself, and they were able to isolate just that so that they could separate it from the plant matter, which could cause contaminants or it to be molded out or things like that, or go wrong. It makes it basically like taking the growing out of the growing and turning it into just like growing the crystals.
More of a lab science behind that process.
Like I said, high level overview, and I'd like to learn more about it, but it sounds pretty cool. That could be the future,
Certainly interesting in terms of reducing some of those environmental impacts, like you said.
Right, maybe reduce the cost or the environmental impact, like the CO2 that we generate from making electricity to grow that stuff indoors. Maybe we can reduce that, things like that. I would be concerned about how different it is from actually growing a plant.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an initial concern for many people, right? I think cannabis oftentimes has been seen as it grows from the ground. It's natural,
Right,
and
yeah.
it's got these benefits because of that. And so
We're getting into it, maybe messing it up.
Right. Or even though we're able to create these compounds and maybe reduce costs and environmental impacts and some of these other things, are we still going to receive the same level of benefits from a lab man-made created
Is it going to be as good, things like that?
Are you going to get the same benefits? Are you going to get the same type of high? And
What kind of limits are on
lose
it?
anything, right? Because you're not having that plant matter, do you actually lose any of those benefits? It's certainly going to be interesting to see. It's certainly going to be interesting to uncover more as more information and research comes out about these types of processes.
I've been cultivating for a long time, and you can always learn something new. Things like this, it's like just shows to see how far we've come from where, back in the day when we had moldy weed, we couldn't do anything with it, to where now they can remediate that and turn it into a usable product and not waste it. Is crazy in itself. Never mind these new things that they
without plant matter.
Yeah,
right?
now we don't even need plants.
Crazy.
Like
crazy.
what else is going to happen? It just, the industry is wild and fun.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well, right? Let us know what you think down below. Drop a comment, share your thoughts.
If you guys know anything more about that article,
feel free to inform us. Add a link to the conversation below, and feel free to send more information along, so we can do some more of our own homework and research and discuss this further. But we'd certainly love to hear your feedback and thoughts below on growing cannabis or growing cannabinoids without the plant matter, without the actual cannabis plant. What do you think? Well, it's been great chatting with you today, George. Again, always appreciate getting some time to sit down from our hectic days and have some fun and talk cannabis.
So
It's been great.
You guys can come in and check out our pamphlet, maybe meet us and get to talk about weed nerd stuff. So.
And we'll certainly continue to go through this in our next video that we do. I believe what's coming up next, looking at it, is edible evaluation. So we will get into edibles next time with all of you here, talk a little bit about how to evaluate what'll work best for you, talk about some of the things that we have in store and how they line up with making those best choices as a consumer. Thanks everybody for stopping by, and I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Again, I'm Mitch with MJ's.
And I'm George. You guys have a good day. We'll see you next week.